move on to it. Welcome to the Regional Services Committee meeting today. Do we have any apologies? I don't know of any. It's easily done. We're on number 3, declarations of interest today.
You've got another paper coming in. My name's written on it, so I just need to make sure that
Yep.
Julie. River damage.
We'll take note of that. Very good. Public forum petitions, deputations. I don't know of any. Confirmation of the minutes. Someone who was here last time. Moved by McCallum, seconded by Peter. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Right. No notification of extraordinary urgent business that we know of. No questions? Any questions I should ask? Nope. Any chairman and councillors' reports? No. We'll be finished in 2 minutes. Right, we'll go on to item 9. Might slow down a bit now. Item 9, so operations report.
Yes, it is.
Yes, so we're on item 9.
Thank you, Chair. We've got item 1 under item 9, which is the annual report for Land and Water Services Division, will be presented by Fiona Young, our Manager for Land and Water Services.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is our annual report. It's the activities from July 2019 through to June 2020 for the Land and Water Services team. So today I've got a couple of bits and pieces. So the first thing I'll do is just a very short couple of slides, and I will need to start sharing my screen, which will take me a few seconds to organise. So there's a couple of slides just to summarise some of the key elements of the report that is attached to the agenda. I've also got a couple of slides I'd like to just take the opportunity to update the committee on the Charlton Waimumu pilot. So there's just a couple of slides there, and then I have a short movie. So just if councillors will indulge me, there'll be a few seconds in between each of those as I get things started. So my apologies in advance for that. We're all getting to grips with this technology. Okay, so thank you. So firstly, and again, these are just a couple of slides summarised from the report that's in this agenda. So in terms of the Land and Water Services team, obviously we sit within the Operations Directorate at Enviro Southland. We've got a significant role alongside other divisions actually working with the community to enhance Southland's environment. So we have skills and experience across the whole team actually around facilitation and connection. And as you'll know from having read the report, we work in a number of, if you like, audiences. So we work with schools, we work with community groups, with catchment groups, but we also a lot of one-on-one work as well, which has been shown through the survey we did this year to be still incredibly important part of what LAWS delivers. We provide on-farm and on-site advice, so that covers off land sustainability side of activities, but also the work that we're doing through Enviro Schools and the work we do in the contaminated land and hazardous substances space. So that's an area we haven't talked to you so much about, but it remains an important part of the work that we deliver. We work hard at this actually to be recognised as a professional and accurate source of information. So it's not something, again, I've talked too much to this committee about, but the training work that we do with our team is really important. So that's both training in the sense of knowledge, so and consolidating some of those really important skills, important information that people know, soils, mitigations and so forth. But we're also, as I mentioned a day or two ago, looking to the future. So we're supporting some work that's happening around catch crops, for example, and actually what opportunities there are for farmers in that space to be stripping nitrogen out of the soil by planting crops like oats actually this time of year. So again, maintaining that's something that we put a lot of energy into. And then finally, you know, we're working closely within the organisation, so it's not uncommon for us to be, you know, I guess connecting with other people like Catchment Division. We work really closely with science. They hold important information. The science team that our community want to be able to access, the information helps drive that change. So that those internal relationships are important. But obviously also through a number of different forums, we connect with rural industry groups, with rural professionals, to make sure that we've got those group. So I guess that's us taking one-on-one into kind of more of a group setting, and that's something that's incredibly important as well. It's been, you know, I reflect always when I write this report or when the team pulls together this report, the 12 months that have been, and I think we can all agree that it's, you know, it's been not a normal year by no stretch of the imagination. I think I touched in the report, for example, on our support we provided to EMS, both during the floods and then during COVID-19 work. But with all of that sort of unexpected, shall we say, work aside, there's still a number of things that I'll just talk through briefly now in terms of what we've delivered as a division to contribute to that thriving Southland. So, August last year, a huge amount of attention came on intensive winter grazing. So we worked alongside other divisions in the organisation. We worked with other agencies outside the organisation to try and deliver a more coherent story around intensive winter grazing, to provide clarity to our farmers and to try and actually be gathering information to support the good practices that were happening. So there's a whole series of work that's happened internally and externally in that space over the last 12 months. We've continued to develop to deliver our focus activity farm plans. We delivered 50 of those over the 12-month period. I have touched on the fact that we are now in the process of looking at a new way of delivering farm plans, and part of that is around the fact that we have now regulatory requirements around farm plans, and also some of the learning that we've done around farm plans has kind of signalled to us that we need to look at sort of different models, if you like, of interaction. Many of you will know that we've been working quite closely with our river liaison committees, refreshing the terms of reference, and we've now completed all of the committee meetings. So we committed, it was actually meant to be during sort of March, April, May. Things were delayed there, so we've now been out and spoken to each of the committees and are in the process of shaping the new final version of the terms of reference and summarising sort of the key messages from those meetings. In the, I guess, we call it a pipeline from, you know, school through to catchment groups. The Enviro Schools hub, and I acknowledge the work of Hannah, who left us in December, sadly, went to the North Island. She's worked really hard in the Gore area, and I guess one of the things that's come out of that is a really strong network of Enviro Schools, but also some relationships, some partnerships that have yielded the Charlton Waimumu pilot project, which I've talked about before and I will touch on briefly at the end of this presentation. A lot of work happening in the landfill risk assessment space. So this is the part of our division that thinks that turns to contaminated land, hazardous substances, and so we've contributed both data financially and staff time to a New Zealand-wide vulnerable landfill risk assessment tool that's now starting to land in terms of the fact that we've just seen the first, if you like, draft of that tool. We're having a look and testing that at the moment. But significantly, we've worked with Invercargill City Council, with landowners, with iwi and the Department of Conservation at Ocean Beach, and we sought funding from the government. And so to date, the detailed site investigation and the remedial options assessment have been completed. So that's been an enormous project relating obviously to exposure of landfill at Ocean Beach. So those are just, that's just some of the highlights. This could be a very long presentation. I'm going to keep going, but some of the highlights that I thought was worth talking about. So just moving to, and this is more started in the last financial year, but is continuing with at great pace, and really acknowledge the work that my team is doing on this project. So the Charlton Waimumu project, this is our riparian planting project that we've been working on. And I hope I've got this number right. I think there are 150 farms that we are connecting with across that catchment area. We know that there are 24 people, farms in that area that have focus activity farm plans. They're sort of a starting point. We're focusing on land that is already fenced in that area, and that's simply because it means that we can get underway with planting a lot quicker. There are at least 50,000 plants that are coming, and we are very grateful for the work we're doing with Hokanui Runanga, Roger Train in particular, who's supporting us. The plants are coming from a program they have going with Modern Prison for a couple of years. So Hokanui Runanga is involved there, Gore Catchment Group are there, Enviro Schools are involved. We're working very closely because we have a new bylaw in terms of planting around waterways to make sure we connect in with our catchment division on that one. So that's sort of the big picture. Here's an example of a property. We're using our GIS mapping. We can actually tell how much, so someone goes, literally right at the moment, people are going out to farms and talking to farm landowners about this opportunity. This is an example of fencing and area that's going to be planted over, we hope, the next 6 months. Spraying and planting is happening in the next week or two. It's getting underway. And again, acknowledge the work that our GIS team have done here. So this is, I think, an example. I don't think this reflects exactly where we're at, but we now have this dashboard that has been created. So on the left-hand side, all of the GIS information that we collect in the field when we go onto a farm is captured, and so we can see how many kilometres of plantings to happen, the areas, and then on the right-hand side, the types of plants, and there's a connection to the spraying and actually getting it around. So again, this is a really important tool for us to see, to be able to monitor progress in the project, and I think it's useful to share that with this committee just so that they have an understanding of the breadth of the work that's going on. So that was quite a quick run through. I'm just going to ask Boy, he's got so I'll stop sharing actually. So we've just got a short movie we've put together. I do hope it's not going to be too loud. My apologies if it is. And it's just a quick snapshot of some elements of the last 12 months.
Hey Carl, so tell me what's happening with our new Farm Environment Plan program?
Well, there's been a couple of changes we've made to the new farm plan. Obviously, the farm plans are now a requirement in the proposed water and land plan, and also in the NES as well. We wanted to engage farmers more in the process of creating their own farm environmental plan. And so the way we've set this program up now is that it does require a lot more input from farmers in the creation of the plan itself, and where the Land Sustainability Officer facilitates that process and provides help and advice where applicable in creating and finishing the farm plan.
Hi, I'm Megan, the Enviro Schools Coordinator for Southland. The Enviro Schools program in Southland has over 50 schools involved and more than 5,200 students. The program is a national program and involves aspects of sustainability in schools. Highlights this year include our secondary school camp for Northern Southland. We also created some online resources during the COVID lockdown. These included stream studies and leaf litter searches. We also had a number of students from Aparima College attend the Coastal Restoration Conference. We created a number of kits for schools to use, including a pest kit, a beeswax wrapped kit, a living landscapes kit, and a water of life kit. These are being used in schools around Southland this term, and the feedback has been great. We were also really lucky to get a new educator. Josh has come on board to the team and is amazing. He's out visiting Southland schools and getting involved in our programs. We've had a really great year with Enviro Schools, and we are looking forward to growing next year and getting out in our community and doing some more activities. Thank you.
So perhaps, Mr. Chairman, just to close, I want to really acknowledge my team who've had a huge year. They've all worked really hard, both within the organisation and the community, and also acknowledge the community, the schools, the individuals we work with. You know, it's our privilege to work with those people and to help share the messages of council out in our wider community.
Thanks, Fiona. That's, no, it was good report. There's plenty of it in there too. So, has anybody got any questions? Lloyd?
Yeah, I just had 2 or 3 reading through the program. It talks about an asbestos liaison group. Is that just Kiwi staff, councils, fairly informal?
So, yes, I would have said somewhat formal. So the TAs and Department of Conservation and iwi meet at least twice a year to connect, and it's also a group that comes together when an issue comes to light as well.
Specifically the one at Ocean Beach or sort of wider?
So there are other conversations underway, but that's certainly where the Ocean Beach kind of came to, because of the fact that there was asbestos found by the public. So that was a significant issue that we
The other one was we talk about contaminated land. Now, is that oil or DDT or something else? Is there a sort of a breakdown of what contaminated actually?
So actually, and I might turn around in a minute just to make sure I get the words right. Hail sites, which are...
Yes, so the Ministry for the Environment maintains a list of activities that are considered to be hazardous.
You might come forward, thanks.
So that list is called the Hazardous Activities and Industries list. We as a regional council maintain a record of these activities occurring around Southland. When we refer to contaminated land, we don't necessarily mean the land is contaminated, just that one of these hail activities has occurred on it, and there is potential for there to be contamination on the property.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Simple question, I think. Firstly, really impressed that you acknowledge your team so much. So what I'd really like to know is how many is your team?
Oh, goodness gracious me. That is changing. I feel like I should know the number. I'm going to say 15.
Right.
We have had a land sustainability officer who has gone on leave. We've got a couple of people on the organisation and a couple of people who are on parental leave at the moment.
So they're getting through quite a lot of work for quite a small team.
Yeah.
I've got several questions, but thanks for the very comprehensive report, Fiona. My initial one I put down was about the farm plans, but you've actually covered quite a bit of that because very important we get buy-in from the farm community. I notice, and I guess it goes with that emergency management, but only 50 this year. We're probably target was about 200 a year or two ago, so I guess there's reasons for that. Does this perhaps more simplified version, will it be able to do more? I know you guys are doing more, but it's just, and good to see it's lining up with, again, I'm assuming with the MES and the regulations, because these things are going to be mandatory. I'll let you answer that one first before I rush on any other questions.
Yeah, so there's quite a large conversation that actually needs to come back to council around how farm environment plans will be delivered across the region, given the upcoming regulatory context. So a couple of things I'd say. Firstly, we actually shifted in our last long-term plan away from the measure of 200, and we now look at the area of influence we've had across the region in terms of the work we've done. We recorded that information via our requests. And certainly there are less focused activity farm plans. That signals obviously some of the challenges we've had this year, but also some of the shifts. So one thing that we have done intentionally over
months is be really actively supporting the beef and land environment plans. So the idea is that we actually then get to a group of people in a structured format in terms of providing our advice and service, and then what we offer for people who want it after they've got an initial plan, we will then go out and visit the site, go out and go around their farm and help them with just shaping up some of those final recommendations. So in terms of the future for farm plans and how they're going to be delivered, as I say, that's a larger conversation. There are some realities that we will have to confront around the fact that as an organisation, we have to be very careful about delivering the farm plans, but also being the regulatory agency. So there will be a shift in how we work in that space from a land sustainability perspective. There has to be that shift. But what we're looking at is how we actually support and can actually facilitate that shift to happen. And the new farm environment plan program that we're looking at is a step in that direction. And what we do know that, and what we, this is the challenge when you put farm plans into a regulatory space, there are some benefits. Everyone has one. They have all that knowledge in one place. Farmers, in our experience, still need to know and understand their biophysical environment and then how to implement and choose those mitigations. So there's still a really critical technical and knowledge role for land sustainability officers to help and work in. And that's part of that transition that we'll see, over the next probably 12 months to 2 years.
Thanks for that very comprehensive answer. The second one was on identifying the landfills, and I've certainly had constituents ringing me about Colac Bay and elderly people's knowledge of where it started and where perhaps the territorial's knowledge seems to be different. I think we've had a few unofficial sites over the years, and after what's happened on the West Coast, it's certainly something that needs to be on our radar with a large Invercargill one that we do know about. But are we sort of have more come out of the woodwork that we weren't aware of, and what is the next step?
So I'll turn to Alex again in a moment, but what I would say is we do have a list of what we understand to be landfills. The question is around the investigation and understanding. So Alex talked about because something happened on the site, potentially makes like a hail, verifying that and gathering information like we've done at Ocean Beach is the next step, and that happens obviously bit by bit because it's quite a significant investment, and we've been very, hugely grateful to Enhancement Environment, so they've funded at the moment the Ocean Beach through the Contaminated Sites Remediation Fund, and so we've had a funding through that, plus really acknowledge the landowners, so Department of Conservation and Carver City Council have put funding into that. So again, happy to come back to this committee if you'd like some more information, because there's quite a lot of process that goes on and quite a lot of detail that has to be considered in terms of both confirming the list and also receiving new information. So we have the selected land use sites map. It's on our Beacon website now, and so that has all of the verified and unverified hail information. So that is continually being updated, whether it be landfills or other pieces of information that come to hand.
My final question was on the plantings and the pilot project that's going on in that Charlton area. Just good to hear about 50,000 plants, fantastic. Who's planting them, who's maintaining them, and is it giving us knowledge to even to think about our ambition to perhaps emulate the Taranaki model and, on a small scale, could we identify which plants and at least ordering some for the next season? It'll be,
Right, so, sorry, let me get this right. So firstly, we're contracting someone to help us with the planting. So we've got a team of people associated with the Hokanui Runanga who are helping with spraying, the planting, and then one post-planting spray. We have a works agreement with the landowners, so we're very much in the early stages about talking to landowners about that. They've all received a letter, some of them more than one. But the idea is that there will be a works agreement, and so the expectation is that the maintenance over the next couple of years will be the responsibility of the landowner. So that's really the only cost in this particular project. This particular beer, there's a couple of reasons for doing this project. One is that we had a real great opportunity in terms of the work we're doing in that area. But the second, and we've been very careful to document a lot of what we're doing, all of what we're doing through this project and all of the questions that are coming up, because the intention is that this is a pilot for a region-wide program. So that's very much front of mind as well in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Now, the way this project is being delivered is probably not exactly how a region-wide program would be delivered, but we're going to be able to learn and see, what works, what doesn't work, what questions, what gaps, how will the cost structure work. All of that will be absolutely critical for a region-wide program.
Good report, pretty busy, pretty sounds of it, by the looks of it, quite happening. There's only one part there though, it looks like you help with compliance flights and organising compliance surveillance. But I didn't actually see in here, because you are, if I say this in a nice way, you're very favoured in the farming community. When you come on farm, they actually enjoy having the land sustainability team. But I was wondering about the linkages between the land sustainability team advice into consents and then helping people with compliance issues. I'm not sure if I saw in your report that that is a seamless operation. You seem to do everything else. So I'm just wondering, going forward especially, maybe your role may slightly change and actually help people understand what consents are, why they need them, how they need them in their business, and making sure that they understand some of those other things before they get into the technical side of the detail of consent.
So, a couple of things. We were involved in the cultivation flights, so worked with compliance through a number of, actually a whole lot of points along the intensive grazing space, and also consents in terms of, for example, the deed permits earlier this year.
I don't see the reporting of that through this as much as I thought I would have seen. That's really nice.
So absolutely take that point on board and just making sure that clarity is there. I think, in the compliance example, compliance is, as we know, is a spectrum. And so actually, advice and education is a point at which actually the enforcement action shifts into advice and education, and then there's actually, very clear connect up to the work that our division does. Certainly, we do go into the space of providing support to the consent team, but also to farmers in terms of consent requirements. We have to be very careful in that space because there is so much change and so much complexity. So this might sound trite, we do what we can on things that are straightforward, but then we have to kind of hand over, or we help facilitate as much as we can. We've just got to be really careful internally in the organisation that we don't, compromise the way in which the regulatory process works. Yeah.
And think of it, through your chair, think of it as an organisational-wide campaign around some of these matters like intensive grazing, where actually the organisation needs to throw all its resources at how do we, if you like, get the behaviours and the practices in the right place. So that involves all of our tools, the land team, the compliance, and the consenting team, and the planning team. So all working together to look at which bits of the puzzle that they need to bring into this campaign. So that's, I suspect we'll be doing that more and more. We're going to be really looking at shift the dial. So we need to be reporting on it, which I think is your point.
Just I'm happy to move the report.
Just before that, I've got a couple of questions if I can, just in regards, obviously just on from the compliance and the land sus, it's obviously, you don't want to get too, a bit like the police a few years ago too, where they joined the traffic officers and the police near the good guys and bad guys, so to speak. But I'm not saying there's good guys and bad guys in the building here, but there is that out on the ground too, and it's good to know where everybody, which part of the system you're in too. But I understand there is a wider view on that. But just a couple of quick, that childhood group, amazing what the Giles is doing out there on that farm. I think I've already said this around we need to get out there as a council. It would be good to go spend half a day wandering around that farm and seeing what they're doing. It's certainly amazing, just the ideas, the thought processes, and the access for the local town, because it's right on the basically on the boundary of the town too. John and I spent a couple of hours out there one day. So it was it's certainly a big learning curve from the south there, looking at farming. And I did have a question, farm focus plan, the name. What we've got, all these plans out here, and now we've got a certified freshwater plan coming in from government. And sometimes I get that many names, I'm going, have I actually got the right plan? They're saying we've got a farm focus and farm environmental plan. We're going to have to get to the point where that's your plan. Because even I'm questioning, I've got farm focus plans, but they're not farm environmental plans. I got, when I did mine. So see if we can get it at some stage. And then the government's obviously thrown out a new one, freshwater plan, that we're all going to have certified. So it's just a point that obviously we're getting all these plans thrown at us. Hopefully they're all the same ones. Same thing. So got to move a bit. Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, just to back up on that, absolutely get one sort of plan that's there. Beef and lamb are very good at delivering things on the ground. But we need just to want to talk about quickly about Thriving Southland. Do you coordinate with them? Because going along and meeting a few of those people and what they're doing in the catchment groups, there seems to be a shift away from individual focus to what you could call group action. So they're seeing things not as in their own farm, they're seeing things at catchment scale. And for example, talking about riparian strips, not just down my place, but right down our neighbours, 5 or 6 neighbours taking all the fences out. And they're talking about bringing wetlands in, sediment capture, 1 billion tree, predator-free, biodiversity, bring that all into one. So there's been, with that funding for that entity, there's been quite a big shift in their thinking on quite a few notches. You can have any sort of coordination there in that space?
So I guess the short story is we're working really closely with Thriving Southland. So we met with them yesterday to talk about kind of program design. The other group I really want to make sure we don't lose sight of are our liaison committees. They're also kind of cross catchments as well. So there's some, as you know, some important work going on with the liaison committees and other groups. But certainly the idea of looking across a catchment, the idea of collective action, the idea of being strategic about where we put mitigations, all of those things are key principles that I think we'll see more of. I think we have to see more of to be effective into the future.
Yeah, we need to elevate that thinking to that group action, to that catchment. And well done with your team. Keep working on that key thing, which is having access to the properties, which you obviously do very well at, having good rapport with landowners. So.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman. We've got to move in a second. Lyndall. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Right, we'll move on to the biosecurity. Who's doing this?
So through you, Chair, Ali will be here on.
She's on here now.
Yep. Welcome, Ali.
Welcome, Ali.
Kia ora, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Good.
So I don't have a video and a PowerPoint for you, unfortunately. I know, I'm sorry. But it's quite a long report, so there are a few things that I would just like to pull out and highlight for everybody. So obviously, incredibly busy year, and I think for us it's definitely been a year of 2 parts. You've probably heard that from a lot of people. COVID did stop our fieldwork dead partway through the year. Luckily, it was towards the end of the season, so we've managed to get a lot of our fieldwork already done. But a lot of our not achieved or partially achieved throughout the year are due to that, and particularly the COVID, but also the flooding where we weren't able to get onto properties, we weren't able to do control for those bits of the year. So a couple of things to note. I guess the biodiversity program is still going strong. We're being absolutely inundated with applications for our environmental enhancement funds. So we're getting more applications than we've got funding for, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've also, the people wanting high value area reports, our ecological surveys, is going up as well. And that's formed the basis of our bids for the COVID stimulation packages. So because those projects are going so well, we've been able to expand them out and as part of the job creation thing. In the biosecurity space, you'll all remember that we got our new pest management plan and the new strategy approved right at the start of the financial year, which is a great celebration for the team. And we've then been able to mould all of our work programs and change them around that new strategy and that new plan. So a lot of the winter went into planning and we started rolling that out in early spring. So the big changes that we've made because of that are things like our gorse and broom program has significantly decreased, and all of that time that's been freed up has gone out into different weed control programs, things that are more strategically important. Things like doing gunnery control down on the coast to prevent it getting into Fiordland National Park, so being a little bit more proactive about things like that. The team's also had a lot of time looking into things like new technology. We've had been investigating things like using drones and then using AI to look at the imagery that comes up to see if we can find the Bodlia, the Cotoneaster, things like that from the drone from the sky, which is going to save us a lot of time in the long term. Unfortunately, we have had a few issues, particularly with the Undaria space. So we've done everything we said we were going to do in Undaria. We've done all the trips that we were intending to do, but we have found that the current investment that's going in, particularly in Breaksea Sound, hasn't been enough to keep and contain the Undaria where we were hoping it would within the Sound. And during the COVID lockdown, we did get a jump of Undaria out. So what we've done is, through our partnership, we've pulled together a strategy for how we can deal with this going forward. And we've come up with funding options, which we're now working through to see if we can get some extra funding for that programme. But that's probably one of the biggest outstanding things or non-achievements that we've done in the year. Other things we missed was we didn't manage to complete our site-led programme for Stewart Island. So that was working with the residents around microchipping and neutering of cats, and then also some of the weed control out there. A lot of the work was planned. We had contracts in place for the weed control. And then as soon as COVID happened, we weren't able to get out there before the pets died off for winter. So that will be a real focus going forward of getting those programs back up in place. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Ali. It's a pretty comprehensive sort of report. I just got a quick question, just in regards to there's obviously with DOC not quite having a little bit of lack of funding in some of the situations. Is that a concern, you know, from doing their part in regards to the process?
Yeah, it can be. It has effects on
Yeah.
We do have things like the possum control program. We do have issues where if we've got dock estate on the boundary of a possum control program or within a possum control program and they're unable to do pest control at the same level on that land, we do get spread of pests out. But we do work really closely with DOC, particularly on Undaria, to try and get equal funding and as much funding as we need. So as with everybody, resource is always a problem, but we do try and work as closely as DOC as possible to get the best outcomes.
That's good. Here.
Two questions, thank you, Ali, with regard to exclusion on page 41 of your report. First one, you talk about just all reports of excluded species being looked into. I'm just wondering if that's proactive enough. And the first one is about sort of wallabies. Earlier this year, there was a wallaby run over on the road at Shingle Creek, just north of Roxburgh. And given that it's highly unlikely that it swam the Clutha, it was probably part of a release of some sort. So are the penalty provisions for illegal introductions, are they well known, are they strong enough, and are they a deterrent?
No, maybe no. So it would be really hard. We would need to catch somebody in the act of releasing wallaby in Southland, I think, to really be able to prove that that person had happened and then to put an infringement notices in place. It would be really tricky. The rules are in place. We have been working, and Dave particularly has been trying to work with landowners up along that boundary to make them really aware that there could be wallabies coming across the border, and also engaging with Otago on a really regular basis to find out what they know, where things are going. But surveillance of all our exclusion species is a big concern. And we've got the marine space as well. We're putting plans together of what does good actually look like and how much should we be investing to try and get things before they're a problem. So to find that first incursion across the border. So we could definitely do better in that space.
Well, I've got a second question, but have you got something to say? That'd be good, John.
No, through you, the chair. There's also the wallabies. There's also a national through the biomanagers framework, which is bringing together, you know, Canterbury and the regions across. There's also a sort of national push on what we might do about wallabies as well. So it's not an unmanaged problem, and it's something that's got the attention of both us and the sector as a whole.
Okay. So my second question was about the marine one, which you alluded to. And I'm aware that, for example, Styella claver was discovered in the Auckland harbour now. It's now probably endemic there because a visiting marine botanist got some dive gear on and went for a swim around, and he came back and said, do you know you've got Styella claver here? No one knew what it was. We've got it listed now. There's some anecdotal evidence it's also in Tauranga. Are we, for example, putting people down to have a look around the port of Bluff and say, just check on that or anything else that might be down there?
So the Ministry of Primary Industries check Bluff Harbour for us, or they have been previously. They now want to negotiate whether we can take on that contract. But we do also try and check whenever we do our compliance trips out to Fiordland. We will also check all of the moorings or all of in our high risk areas where we think things would drop off boats in the first place. So we've kind of got that in place, but we have had University of Otago do a really good report this year to look at actually where are all of these high risk places? How often should you be searching in Bluff Harbour to find incursions? How often should you be searching your moorings? And they've pulled a really comprehensive programme together, which hopefully in the next long-term plan we can maybe discuss whether it's something we can actually put into place.
Thank you, that's good.
Very good. Peter, then Lyndall.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ellie, I know what's not on your list is wild deer populations, but there is an increasing focus on that, especially where I live. Large amounts of deer are being shot out of helicopters. Just got a bit out of control, or quite a lot out of control. And I'm aware that DOC are doing work in this space too, nationwide. So is that something you're thinking about? I know it wouldn't be an easy thing to pop the deer onto your list, but we've got to face up to the fact if we're going to be doing all these plantings throughout the province, we've got to protect them somehow.
Yep, so when we did the pest management plan review, deer was one of the species that we looked at, but because it's being managed by the Wild Animal Control Act rather than the Biosecurity Act, the decision was that it's something that we should leave under that act, and we should leave for the Department of Conservation to manage as the primary agency. But we will work with landowners and provide advice on deer control if they've got issues. And as part of the new biodiversity funding, one of our proposals is that if we've got a really significant high biodiversity area, we would provide fencing at a deer or goat standard to protect that area and then do the removal of dogs from the area. But yeah, predominantly it's managed by the department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Ali. Just about the Environmental Enhancement Fund. By around about how much is it demand exceeding fund?
We had 45,000 in the budget this year, and it was up to about 70, 80, I believe. And that's we're not putting any effort into getting applications. So when we start with the new funding that will hopefully get approved, we'll be able to really, really make some big differences with that programme.
Good. Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. One was about the Ontario, whether when it's harvested, if there is a use for it, because it does have a food value. Just wondering if it's been of its potential has been investigated down here as a possible source of income?
So I believe that Otago University and Otahu are working on turning it into a really valuable resource, and they're focusing most of their effort on the Otago coast at the moment. We've had very high level conversations, discussions about that, and what we believe at the moment is that Fiordland is so hard and so expensive to get to that it's really hard to make it a viable business out of the amount that's in Fiordland and then to be able to extract it. But it's definitely something, as we tackle Undaria, we will be open to looking at building into a program. We also do need to be aware that we're trying to do this for the maximum environmental protection, which means we want to try and get as much of it out as possible. So we don't want to leave a population that's harvested over a long time if we possibly can.
Good. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, Ali, on the possum control with the PCAs pulling back with osprey, and obviously unable to keep up with, because there's a lot of, obviously, it's been quite brought up, the possums in some areas will probably over the whole problem. Is there any way of actually, I mean, before this gets out of hand, I mean, it's not just possums, before it gets out of hand, if we can't control ourselves locally, is there any way of getting funding from government or through Osprey, or, I mean, we're pulled out of it, we're still funding them.
Yeah,
so is there anything, any way, or do we need to look at a rating system to actually put more money into that sort of form of control?
we did include possum control as one of our expanding possum control and linking with predator free as one of our bids that went into the COVID response thing to create jobs and increase contractors. We haven't heard back whether that one's potential or not, but in reality, it's probably a wee bit down the list of some of the others. I don't think we would be able to get any more funding from Osprey. They're really focusing on areas where they're still trying to deal with TB. So if we want to get the programme up to the level that Osprey have withdrawn from the region, then we probably need to look at our funding system.
Thank you.
Good. Nicole?
Yes, so just following up on that last part, it would be good to hear how good the communication is between the Regional Council and Osprey when they're leaving areas. So I understand in the past there were often debate stations, etc. And you're right, I don't think they're going to be funding that, but you partially answered the question with the Jobs for Nature and shovel-ready projects. There looks to be potential for possum control going forward, and possibly even the area cleanup. If you're trying to, some of these jobs are supposed to be trying to relocate people in the tourism industry, and some of them can use scuba gear, that they might be fit for purpose to do some of that stuff. So certainly if that funding comes through, I think we could see quite a boost to our PCAs, because that initial knockdown is probably the important thing.
Absolutely. And so Dave Burgess does talk to TB-free Osprey on a reasonably regular basis. So he meets them a couple of times a year, and we get all of the plans about where their operations are going to be and where they're going to withdraw and all things like that. So we do have that link going at our level, and then at a national level as well. The biomanagers framework talks to Osprey at a national level. So there is a lot of cross communication happening.
Well, that's good to hear, because I am on that shareholders committee for local government, and it doesn't seem to be uniform across the country. Some regional councils have quite a good contact, and others don't. So good to hear we do have reasonable.
I was just going to say, I'll also speak to the CEO as well. So, yeah.
All good. That's all. We've got someone to move that.
I'll move.
Eric, second. David, all in favour say aye. Against? Karen. Thank you, Ali, for that. That was great.
Everyone. But yeah.
All right, we move on to the Drinking District Works Program. Annual report. Patty. It's a rundown.
Yeah, I think you said that computer, the person speaking.
Yep.
I think so.
Yeah, it is my best side.
I'm not saying anything.
PowerPoint presentation, I forgot to bring. Okay, well, just to go briefly, we've got quite a large report that the council work supervisors have put together here. And as everybody has, we've been very busy here. Starting with floods and wire, February ones, and then in COVID. And of course, all the damage that we had through the whole system, we have always worked through COVID. Very trying conditions, and also a hell of a lot of work they had to get through to make all that everything safe for the community. I'll do Fiona, I can't praise my guys enough for what they've done over the last 8 months or so, I suppose it is. So just going through the report here. There's a couple of little typos on the budget sheets. The first column is actually the actuals. The second column is the budget. So, we've managed to keep to the budgets pretty well. The insurance group is not included in this. And also the insurance payout is not included in this. Use the draft. That's an ongoing thing at the moment, and then there'll be a tidy up at the end. As of just in normal business as usual, we've done pretty well. And a lot of the work that's in here that's not insurance group is resolved from the floods as well, so we've managed to cover that pretty well. We've only had one, which is the wire, which is overspent, but that was through the committee's agreement with some emergency works that we had to do over the wires. So, is there any questions on it? There's a lot to get through.
Yes, thanks, Paddy. Obviously, it's been an interesting year for you guys, and a great thanks has to go out to you with all the flood work, the involvement. It was fair, full on. You're put to the test. That's what you're there for, I suppose. But I mean, always planning for the rainy day, and it certainly came. So done very well. Appreciate it from the committee. Just in regards, one question I was just going to ask. Obviously, with that flood work, have you been able to? Obviously, there's been a lot of work being done. Was the other sort of maintenance work achieved, or are you a bit behind, or from the normal work, so to speak?
Direction.
Yeah.
From stuff that we would have probably done normally during the year, but there's more important stuff. And we've always done that, prioritising the works, especially even after just a small flood. So we've just changed our direction of priorities to get through what is there. And there's no risk at the moment. All stock tanks, we're pretty confident that we're doing all right, much work. But you never know.
Good. I've got Nickel and then Lloyd.
Just on the wire one, Patty, we mentioned these little projects where they're doing something on the railway. Will we actually see some of those results? Because that's very interesting work.
Yeah, we'll follow it up with the science team that we're doing that. So we will follow it up with them.
And we further on the confirmation of the funding for the wire. That's why Mr. Jones is down here.
Yes, definitely. Just here, why we asked for $1 million? We got 750,000. So we're pretty happy with that. Basically, all the shovel ready, which I was going to talk about next, is we got 75% of what we asked for, and we got 75% of everything we asked for. So nothing was fine.
Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another question on the wire. Since its flow is only about a third of what it would have been prior to the hydro scheme, is there a bit of leeway, like if you get a flood down it now, presumably that's not going to cause the hassle that it would, say, down in Matara, because it's still using up some of the old pipe.
Yeah, you can do at certain flows. Yeah, there is a maximum flow where it will go, and also it can start eroding the banks too, even on the old flows. At the moment, you can handle it reasonably well with the normal flows, what we actually let through the weir. Do a couple of road spots which got worse in the last flood, and we've fixed those. So covered there, but what's going to happen in the future, we're not sure.
Thanks, Lloyd. Peter?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a bit of an unusual question, but it's just that you've gone into what's the big store, the new store, the Kmart, and I saw that Odapuni stream look like you come out of that. I haven't been in there for ages, but I remember walking down that thing, and you look out at the Odapuni flowing there, and you go, oh, and you think of all the people that come in and out of that store. There's something could be done to beautify just that small little stretch that's high visibility, either not us or contacting a local, environmental group to do something. I know it seems a bit comical, but the reality is that it's such high visibility area. That was just my thoughts. I haven't been there.
There was a little
I've
corner,
been there once, and that's what I saw, and I don't really.
there was a little corner there that's actually just below the wall, but sort of stepped, and it could be a good place to do some planting in that. We've brought some brooms of all things, so so that's been cleared up. I think they have put a gravel and
It's just something for people to think about next time they happen to go into the store, have a wee look, and
yeah, we can do it as part of our city program. It's not a problem.
You might be, sorry. You might be able to talk to the Invercargill City Youth Council about some of that as well, because many of them are frequent users of the Kmart facility.
We do as you see in the, if you read in the Invercargill, we do a lot of farming.
That's right. Might be a good way to start a conversation.
good suggestion.
Okay, there's nobody else. Actually, I might in regards to, we're going to maybe ask for a motion of thanks from the committee. I'd like to move it that basically just points the catchment team for their work during the flood, of the two floods this year. It's been a lot of work, and maybe we need to sort of say thanks, but it might be better to put it in a more formal way. I'll move that. Linda will second that. Do we all agree? Say aye. Against? Carried. Okay. Very good. Thanks, guys. It's been an interesting year. Good, successful one. Sorry. Oh, yes. Yep. I'll ask for a mover for that report. Thanks.
Happy to move the one I didn't catch in time was the urgent business. There is a supplementary report which probably needs to be approved.
It'll probably come under item 4. Right?
Is it item?
It might well come up later, but I think we sort of normally have to approve or accepting.
Oh, okay. Do we want to go back to that?
Oh, we have got a piece of urgent business, have we?
Is it?
This one here. This is the one I referred to in the declaration.
Okay, do you want to move back to just to confirm that we have got urgent? Accepted that there is another item in regards to that. Nicole, you have to move that. Someone to second that, please. Peter, all in favour, say aye. Against? It's carried. So we've got it in there.
Abstain from voting.
Yep.
I'm happy to move the annual report that has been presented to us today from Paddy.
Very good. Have we got a seconder? Seconder for that? David, all in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Right, we'll move on to item 4 then.
So it's just to give you an update of where we're actually at today. quite a bit of work, so, you know, but like I said, basically underway, we've still got a lot ahead of us, but, all the critical areas are there. And, that's in the all the major areas that we've got. Insurance claims have been lodged, with only the odd claim remaining due to ground conditions that we can't get in and finish it off, but we've made it so. Going on to shovel-ready projects, we had official notification that has been received from the government that it's all going ahead, funded by 75%. And we're waiting on contracts from EMB, who we're dealing through on this one. The steering group has been set up within a year to help manage the whole process, because shovel-ready is not the only one, there's going to be there's a lot of others. And a paper will be coming to council discussing the benefits of the program and the financial implications. Follow up on that. Guy, that's about right.
Oh, no, through YouTube, there will be a paper coming along, so.
Very good. Lloyd?
Let's pick up on that, because in that paper, I'm looking, what I'm looking for, especially probably from an OPAC point of view, is I think we need to keep these shovel-ready projects separate from normal day-to-day business. We need to have a tracking process through there so we can actually see that it's got its own life and legs and drivers. I don't want to get it confused within the normal reporting processes of council, which is, you know, business as usual type stuff. So I think all those projects we need to make sure, while they may be reported and then report is collective, we actually need to make sure that we understand our business.
We've got a couple of draft ones that have been given to other regional councils, or other contracts looking at. They have to set up a separate account altogether. They are going to be paying quarterly in advance to these projects. We've got to do a cash flow, which we're basically working on at the moment. And they can go into that account to see what's going on. So it's quite separate to anything that's running here. It's right and separate.
Just through you, Chair, yeah, there is a completely separate framework, not only for the administration and management of it, my discussions about setting up how we run those projects, but there is a separate reporting layer as well. So
come to that.
yeah. So there's a whole separate structure to deal with those. Now that fits within our system, but nonetheless we will be able to peel out those specifics and those projects, both on an accounts perspective, an outcomes perspective, and also in a delivery space. So we're developing those structures, much the same as all the other councils. Pardon?
Similar to what Tony said?
Yes, exactly. Very similar. Probably a little bit more sophisticated than Waituna. Also, it's important to notice that we've got a regional sector framework that's enabling coordination across the reporting between councils. So as we interact with government agencies, we've got a more uniform system between councils and a more uniform system between councils, the sector and central government. So there's quite a lot of efficiencies and sharing of framework, sharing of reporting processes that is emerging. Paddy, through his river managers, SIG connects with the sector, and I'm on what we might call a shovel-ready SIG. They've established a special entity across the sector to coordinate. So I think you can be pretty comfortable around that, that there'll be a separate frame.
I've got a question just in regards to shovel-ready from a practical point of view. The timelines that these will take and just the size, they're obviously quite large jobs, so to speak. Is it going to put a bit of pressure on the systems within Southland? From obviously scoping out these, it's going to be some pretty major work being done.
Jobs, they
the capacity
can be up to 2 to 3 years. We nominate when we're going to be doing it. They'd like us to start straight away as soon as possible on some of these things, or at least be seen to be doing something. Because,
election year.
About a month.
But that's what they would like. But we can actually stipulate in our cash flows when we will be doing the work. That space it out because some of this coming summer we might be able to do anything. It might be wet. And a lot of it's earthworks that we've got to do. It is designed for the local economy, local contractors and all that. We're trying to make sure we stick to that if we can. But then we'll be putting out tenders for a lot of these works. And I'm too sure how that who will be involved in that.
That's good. Lloyd, if you go.
Yeah, my understanding is that the government's really looking for work and not administrative, just gathering money through administrative processes. So I think they'll be looking to make sure that if they're going to spend $100, they're getting to a large part of that in actual work on the ground. I think that's a big thing that we need to make sure we're aware of. There's something else too that's just stuck in my mind, but these are pretty important projects, Mr. Chairman, and we need to do it well and be seen to do it well. This is about building confidence in the central government, and if we do that well, and I think we can look forward to other monies in the future. Oh, that's the second point. Paddy just mentioned that he's got 75% of the money. We've got to decide where the other 25% comes from and provide that in a timely manner. I don't want to underestimate what that means. We're talking about a $30–35 million project, as I understand it. But it's around about that 30. It's quite a chunk of money that we will have to find.
For us, involved in Southland, 18.5.
Yep.
And the other bit is Cardiff City Council.
There's also, I'm thinking, I'm jumping into the longer term plan stuff. We've actually got money for Fish Passage as well. There's other stuff that we'll be able to put to the shoveling project.
Just through your council, sorry. So there is a contribution that will be required by council. The total portfolio of projects may be around the 30 million, but not all of those projects require contribution. So there's different funding mixes for different projects, and there's also different partners in Cargill City who have a slightly different ratio of funding mix for their parts as well. That question will come to council
with the report.
With the report, and a decision for council will be how they deal with that. There is we are waiting on some details of how that funding arrangements through contractual arrangements actually manifests, and once we have that information, then there will be discussion with council about how that's funded. That'll be led by Wilma and Neil and myself, which is part of we've called it a project board. We've formed a project board to manage the delivery of these projects as an integrated whole. So that'll be both funding, reporting, risk, and operationalising the delivery.
Thank you.
That's good. Now, Lyndall, then Nicole.
Not a question, just a statement. I'm comforted to know that the money is coming in advance, shall we say.
Can I just hedge for some bits?
Some is better than none, I would.
Oh no, I can only concur. Yeah, that's right. Look, actually, the government hasn't done too badly.
Look, you know, this, especially the shovel ready for the flood banks, this is the first real government support we've had since the 80s. Some of this, the benefits will be intergenerational for some of this, so there'll be ways of working through that funding. Yes, we will have to come up with some funding, but as John has pointed out, some components are different to others, but no doubt we'll work through that during the planning.
That's good. No more questions. Can I have someone to note the update on that report, please? Hopefully someone. Lyndall and Lloyd will second it. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried.
Now, just for clarification.
Yes.
We'll do the urgent bit at item 11.
Item 11. That's all right. Item 5, progress, contracts and progress and works. Who's up for the bat?
That's that one here. Progress on work as well.
So that'll go to, so
No, do you want to do that in this item? No,
do it 11.
it's in 11.
And it's just the contracts, with, all the works that have been written out for the last quarter. We can just go through the contract.
Page 98 for those of you.
Yep, 19,
I think it's a 5-minute dissertation on each one.
Might also need some here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Ask them about any kind of individual.
Well, I just got to point out my name's written here, so I'm not going to participate in the discussion.
Good. Can you note it? Has anybody got any questions on that?
I'll move the item.
Move a seconder. David seconded it. All in favour, say aye. Against? No, carried.
Abstain from voting.
Abstain.
For the purposes.
Abstained. Right. Move on to lease inspections. Thank you, Patty.
Gents.
The team. Keep up the good work, hard work. Water where it's meant to be.
Keep the water away from the
Doug, yeah. Very good, Doug. Got the, you want to give us a rundown on what's going on in lease land?
What's going on? Well, I guess we too had COVID, but it didn't really have a lot of influence over anything that we had planned or not planned. If anything caused a bit more havoc, it would have to be the floods, not only in February, but a month or so later. They went under again, but still, we've got a few river problems that we're looking into with catchment. But other than that, it's come out pretty good on the weather side at this stage from those two incidents. So I have, as you can see, I didn't do the March inspections earlier in the year because of the lockdown. But other than that, yeah, they're all fine. But so I have the March and June quarters, and I'm quite happy to take questions.
Very good, thank you, Lloyd.
Yeah, I just wondering what your favourite spray is for gorse.
It's the lessees that spray the gorse.
Oh,
I do use Conquest or Tordon around our bush reserves and things like that for gorse and broom, but I don't spray anything on the land as such. That's
Anybody else got any questions in regards to lease inspection? All very quiet. Well, if that's the case,
There was one about a house, I just can't remember who it was, it's the first part. The house repair or house need.
has there been some house repairs?
do you think it might have been the Timpany block, the one that we tendered just recently? I've done quite a bit of work inside on that. It just got done before COVID sort of closed us down. So, moving just afterwards, we're pretty lucky. We just painted it and recarpeted it inside.
Okay.
There's another one, perhaps. Where there's a reserve area on a lease block, like with O'Neill's?
Oh, sorry, yeah, when I mean a reserve, I mean anything that we've got locked up that we don't lease to anybody, like QE2 trusts, like the Tidaroa wetland, or we've got wetlands out here at Murray Swains or Bulmullers. It's just a fenced off area that I call a reserve. It has no status as a reserve, but to me it's a reserve because there's no stock or no one's allowed inside it to do anything like that.
So are there any QE2 reserves on land that are sort of in the responsibility for the sea?
No. We do have QE2s in the responsibility, or we take that responsibility.
Rightio, if we're going to have questions, we've got to move to note those inspections, lease inspection reports. Peter, seconder.
Yep.
Lloyd. Beat you to the Lloyd, all in favour, say aye. Against, no carried. Very good. Now move on to item 10.
It's all yours.
Phil? You can throw it back at me now. Welcome.
Well, Tato, it's good to see you all looking so well. Department of Conservation, there's been quite a lot been going on. There's been some interesting things happen recently. First, I'll answer a couple of questions which were raised last time. I think you're asking about Howden Hut. They're currently being demolished. And no, I checked in with our heritage and visitor team yesterday. No decision's been made as to a replacement for that structure at the time being. I'm not sure why. That's where that's at. Root burn track is part of it is closed till the 6th of December, and that's all on our website. That's a section from, where is it? Lake Mackenzie to the Divide, and also on the Milford track, a section of that is remaining closed till the end of November at this stage, and that's from Dumpling Hut down to Sandfly Point. So, yeah. But yeah, sorry, I can't give you any clarification on what's going to replace it. I'm not sure. The 5th of August was a busy day. We had out at Tiwaiwai Bay a number of people watching a southern right whale, and this is interesting. And it was just off Oropuki, and about 9:30 they noticed a whole lot of birds starting to converge in this area too. And the birds cleared away, and they suddenly saw a small southern right whale appear, a wee tail. So it was a mum calf. So that was good. And one other time, more recent, a few years ago, it was 2012. We had a calf born around Tiwaiwai Bay too. So that was good. At the same time, same day, we found a dolphin washed up near Oropuki. It was an hourglass dolphin. Very rare. They're very small dolphin, but they're usually found between the tip of South America and the Antarctic. So it's unusual that it was over here. And necropsy was done on it and showed it died of pneumonia. So the most unusual thing. I've got a wee photo of it. It was in the bay, yeah.
Not very big, is it? Considering where its natural habitat, it was interesting it got pneumonia.
That's kind of weird, isn't it? At least it wasn't COVID.
Wow, are you sure?
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, we completed a Tikana Manu Battle for Our Birds 1080 operation in Waikawa, and post-monitoring has been really good. We had pre-drop, we had 54% tracking tunnels for rats, and mice was 19% occupancy in our tracking tunnels. Post-operation, 0. So that's really good. The possums was a 7% residual track catch and down to 1% post. So that's quite successful. We're looking at Hokanui possum control operation. Also we're doing in the Catlins and the Blue Mountains. We're looking at assessing the populations of mahua in those areas. We've also, through our National Lizard Advisory Group, we've employed a contractor who's doing a 3-year survey on our Tautuku forest geckos in the Catlins. We've always believed, I've seen them in a few places, that they're widespread but in low numbers, and that's just being confirmed really through that work there. We've just, COVID, as you will know, same with this environment itself, and it just stopped all our field work dead for a period of time. On the Awarua Waituna area, we've reviewed all our trap network on the Tiwai Peninsula, making sure that everything's working optimally for tracking mustelids. And we're still seeing a lot of cats around. We had notification from a farmer that one of our pig traps had a pig there. So one of our guys went down, took a rifle with him with 5 rounds, and found 8 pigs. So he closed the door on the trap, and he was able to dispatch them. Luckily, he had a knife with him. But so that's really shouldn't say that. There was successful. Yeah.
It was a good shot.
Our Maka Hooker team, our work down with the subs, it's been paused. International visitor levies have been sort of dried up with the tourism, but they have received a bit of funding. So a bit of work has been going on to completing the operational planning. And also the University of Auckland had a team down looking at whales. And so some of our guys went down and we were able to retrieve some data, like some collars of cats, and looking at how they're moving around. Also investigating using a Judas pig to do some pig culling. So there's a number of things on the go there. Happy for any questions. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep, Peter and then Nicole.
Any date times for the opening of the Rootburn and Milford tracks? You did say they're closed. And I would have thought if the hut isn't being rebuilt at Howden, because that's a juncture of Capel's, Greenstone and the Rootburn, a toilet would be minimal in that area. Any comment?
When I was discussing this yesterday, they said that there's a number of shelter ideas being kicked around and planned, but nothing's been confirmed. But they at least have to have some sort of shelter with a toilet. I agree with you there. I just can't tell exactly what's going to happen because I don't know. But I'll actually feed that back. Okay?
And the opening of those tracks, will that happen before the tramping season gets underway?
Hopefully. Yeah, depending on how the work is going.
Thank you.
All right. Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Guns Camp.
Yes.
There's been talk around that people use the word unrecoverable. Has there been an engineer's report on the camp itself to determine that there is a bit of concern from one or two? The Guns Camp has got a huge amount of history behind it.
Sure has.
So what's the status on that, Phil? Can you tell us? And instead of just people saying it's unrecoverable, we actually need to know technically, is that the case?
I would have to come back to you and ask the right questions of the right people. I don't know. I don't know if Tim Cross, our local engineer, has gone out there. I don't know what our town, our office have done in terms of assessing that.
There's a trust that operates.
There's a trust that operates here, but they're working pretty closely with Doc. So I'll have to come back to you, Peter.
It's just on the Judas pig idea. I remember some years ago, I think it was Osprey that put some into the Hokanui, and remarkably they almost all disappeared, and there was a suspicion that perhaps pig hunters had been able to get onto the frequency and find them. So just something to think of.
Fortunately, themselves, there's not too many hunters wandering around. But yeah, but no, that's
Lloyd. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil, as far as possums are concerned, I think the original idea was kill the possums, we'll control TB. But maybe our stance there should be shifting, so that if we kill the possums, we're looking after biodiversity.
Yeah.
I always wonder whether the social argument should be changing there, and maybe that would help all of us and yourselves, as we move forward in that one. The other thing I was wondering is, down in Waituna, I know that you made a comment about traps and your trapping program, but we were having trouble, if I understand it, with the Wi-Fi network to make sure that we knew, because down there the Wi-Fi is pretty sparse, but those traps you were trialling to give you information, multi-kill traps, those sorts of things, what was actually going on. Have you solved that one?
No, we haven't solved it yet. It's quite a dead spot around there, and I know that Waituna team are working on that. Yeah, totally agree regarding possums and the shift and attitude around that. There's still an amazing amount of people who believe possums are pretty much vegetarian, and not. And we know in the Waitutu we've got footage of possums coming in and will bite the back of the neck of a nesting kaka and then eat the eggs and chicks, but leave the adult. And and you can actually tell from the carcass what's killed it. And possums are shockers.
You've only got to look at their teeth and claws, and you know that they're not just a leaf eater.
Oh, that's right.
Just to pick up the pick up the cats, I know that, some time ago when we did the early work down at Waituna, somebody picked up a big cat, like a majorly big cat.
Yeah,
Black
metre and
one.
a half long.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, on your comments earlier on, I think that there's a lot more cat movement around and semi-domesticated being led off, because I think that's okay. I don't want to, I suppose what I'm getting to is I'd rather the public put that into the SPCA than go down the road and let it out of the door of a car because it's getting near to Christmas. I think we need to, I suppose what I'm getting at with some of my comments is we need to change our messaging. That is not helpful to the bigger, wider picture, to the global picture, to the environmental picture. We need to change that messaging so that we actually get the right behaviours driven. And I think some of that stuff, that messaging has changed over time. And I think we need to move with that.
Well, I totally agree. People have a perception that feral cats are mangy things, small things. They're not. They can be massive. Two colleagues of mine were driving to Tiana, and it was night time, and they just passed Mossburn, heading towards Burwood, and in the headlights, they stopped. A creature walked across the road, and it was a big cat, and they swore it looked like a panther. They realised it was just a big feral, but these things get massive, and I don't think people realise that.
I shot a 12 kilo one on our Roxburgh block.
Well done. Is that right?
12 kilos.
Give it to Lord, stuffed it for you.
Strong at the front end, it's not till you actually catch them that you realise the power of them on your shoulders.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking, and I don't think people realise
There's the bells on it, didn't it?
That was one of the ones I didn't have to take a bell off.
Yeah, sorry.
It's there's a lot of work to do around perception and education. And cats, as you know, is a very touchy subject.
I suppose that leads on to the fact is what can we do, being ES and DOC working together with some of these messaging, so we need consistency across the organisations. And we do a lot of work together anyway, so maybe there's another linkage that we can actually put through there to help, because we've both got common interests.
We so do, and I think we need to align ourselves a lot more, because our outcomes are the same. I was disturbed, Mr. Chairman, to hear Eric's anecdotal story of the wallaby. That's not good if you believe people are releasing the things.
Well, it could, some people have them as pets. You know, they're out shooting and they take one home. And that could have been the source, no one knows. But I think people also, we know with wild pigs and tar that's happened.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it happen with wallabies?
It's true. It's hard to manage stupid, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cruise control is one
No
thing.
idea what you're talking about.
But I mean, it's just, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Anyway, if there's no more questions in regards to that, well, thank you, Phil.
Pleasure, thank you very much.
The update,
I'll move that we
accept the verbal update. And Nickel, second it. Sorry, Eric. My eyesight's stronger than this one.
So I'll deal with the
Yeah,
matter.
we'll move on to things. Can we, all in favour, say aye? Aye. Against? Carried.
I'll deal with the matter of
Yes.
urgent business. It shouldn't take long. The urgent business is that we need to add the said document to the list of works progressed between the 1st of April and the 30th of June on page 103 of the progress works report. It was omitted just because it didn't arrive on time, so we just need to add that to that list.
Right.
I'll move.
Is there any, are all,
I don't think we
we're all
should.
pretty happy?
Happy to
Unless there
discuss
is a
it.
question.
Yeah.
I'll ask for someone to move that. Eric. And a second, David. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, I think that there's no public excluded business. So we wind it up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil.